Hey guys, what is up? Kid here of Burn1 with the Shadowverse Evolve channel, as always bringing you another deck profile, this time on Courtly Dance Sword, Paragons of the Colosseum meta. This is a really fun, interesting list, and if you like gambling with the top cards of your deck, this is the deck for you. And it also has some interesting tech in the list that combats some of the top tier decks, but we'll just go ahead and get right into it. Alright, so here's the deck list itself. This is the version I've been messing around with and playing, and it's kind of the only version I really like overall if we're playing the Courtly Dance stuff. So I'll just kind of get into it here, and then we'll explain as we go along here. We still play the good heroic stuff. Obviously, heroic entry plus Mock Knight is an insane high roll potential, and luckily this deck has a lot of 3 and lower cost followers in it that we do want to summon. So heroic entry is not the worst card in the world to be playing with, like, not the full heroic archetype package, but we still need some amount to activate Mock Knight's secondary effect on Evo to deal 4 instead of 2 damage on Evo. So Iron Rod Defender was the best one drop that you could play that's heroic. It's a goblin, and then later in the game it could potentially be a 2/3 ward, which is nice. Next, Kagemitsu Matchless Blade. This card I have a love-hate relationship with. I think in a way it's almost important to have this card in your deck because one, it has dual use application here, I guess. One is that a lot of the times this is just going to be a one-drop removal, quote-unquote removal spell for you, but it's on a body that also works well with Leonidas' Resolve if you go the route to win games through Leonidas' Resolve. The other thing too is that it doesn't come up often, but the fact that there is potential to hit the 7 Evos and then playing this out to give the refresh on strike for this follower, meaning you can push out a lot of damage instantly, especially once Leonidas Resolve is already on the board. Obviously, to combo with this, we do play one of the Outrunning the Encroaching Heat. You kind of have to naturally draw into it, unfortunately, but a lot of times you won't be playing this until late game. Luckily too that this kind of synergizes with the deck itself anyway, so if you like play Mars Knight out, Evo, bring out Mock Knight, and you still have 2 play points left over, you can go ahead and give Mars Storm and then swing in that way. You can give any of your other random followers Storm as well if you just have 2 play points left over and don't really have a lot to work with. The card surprisingly is like a little bit of a surprise factor on like getting extra damage in or lethals in that way, especially when you have a lot of really solid one drops that could gain Storm, one of them obviously being Kagemitsu. Next, Perseus. This is one of the other better one drop goblins we have in the list. Getting to the 4 followers on board, including this one, to get the +1/+1, making this a one drop 3/3 happens very easily and like naturally with this deck, especially when you start getting to later turns and you hit Courtly Dance and you pull this off the top. A lot of times this is just going to be a 3/3. What do we really want here other than like having big bodies that are cost less than they should be costing? Steadfast Samurai is a love-hate relationship with this card. This card almost feels like you're forced to play it because of how the meta is currently working right now. This is kind of a quote-unquote alternate win condition as well against specifically Kuon. Kuon will have some trouble dealing with this card when you do combo it with Armor of the Stars, but a lot of the times too, if you don't like literally have the perfect do this on turn 3 curve and then slowly pump it up, they can easily answer this once they hit 5 to 7 play points, depending how fast they get spell chain. So a lot of times this does get answered out, but what's nice about this is if you do spend a turn giving it Armor of the Stars, that usually that is that following like next 2 to 3 turns, this will get like 2 to 3 attacks in before it does naturally get removed by like AoE removal or something else as well. One thing to note too is that just because this takes no combat damage doesn't mean it doesn't lose to Bane. So your Abyss matchup with this card is horrendous. Your matchup into Egg Haven, horrendous. So you have to be well aware that like this follower will just lose to Bane and what matchups have Bane, so you don't spend some of your resources to like give this +1/+1 and rush to like make it bigger, only to lose it to like a 2-cost Bane follower, which is unfortunate. It does happen and you get sad. We have enough one drops that Fina Dynamite Daredevil is really important. What I like about this card is not only does this let us tempo against our opponent's one drops as well if we went first, but we this helps us build into our combo turn while also presenting some potential high roll on turn 3 as well, depending on which route happens. So Fina is really good at making it very consistent to find a Steadfast Samurai if you opened up Armor of the Stars in your opening hand. Usually if you have a Fina, Armor of the Stars, and 2 other cards, you're pretty happy, especially if you're going first, because a lot of the times you just want to get the Steadfast Samurai and Armor of the Stars if possible. So you open up Armor of the Stars and Fina. On turn 2 you play Fina, you top check 5, we look for the Steadfast Samurai. If we hit it, turn 3 we play Steadfast Samurai and Armor of the Stars, and usually that's enough threatening potential there that our opponent will have to try to answer this immediately, or you're going to get like an extra 6 damage in over the course of like 3 turns after this, because it is pretty tough to answer Steadfast Samurai with Armor on the Stars in certain matchups. Other matchups though, like I said, like Abyss and Ward or Egg Haven and stuff like that, card just dies to everything basically. Ramia here is one of our huge like kill potentials, as well as a turn 3 high roll play as well. One thing I didn't respect in the beginning when I was first thinking about this deck in general, I was like, I don't really like Sword this meta at all. It doesn't feel like it's doing anything like cheap, not doing anything that feels busted. But actually, Ramia is insanely good because of the fact that her evo costs 1 less for every other follower on your board, which means on turn 2, for example, if you play Fina and say you don't have the Armor of Stars into Steadfast Samurai combo or something like that, but a lot of times Fina will live cross turn depending on the matchup, because a lot of matchups they just don't have a way to interact with your board immediately, depending on what you're playing against, obviously. But if Fina lives or another 1-drop randomly lives, Ramia plus another 1-drop in your hand makes it so if you're going second, it only costs 1 evo point to evo her. So you on turn 3 you can get a 4 storm follower and have a semi-wide board this way. We obviously do play 3 of Ramia Sonic Racer because she's like one of the key pieces to this deck popping off. A lot of times when you high roll into her off of some of the top deck scenarios with Courtly Dance, that's when you're going to be doing the most amount of damage, which is great, but usually those turns don't happen until like turns 9 and 10. That's one of the big weaknesses for this deck. Some of its insane potential happens after Kuwan's already winning the game. So that's part of the reason why Sword this meta isn't as strong as it could possibly be. I think if Kuwan didn't exist, this deck would be very consistent and very, very strong. It gives me very similar vibes to Hunter Forest, but playing slightly different strategy to close out games. Next, Armor of the Stars, like I talked earlier, it's mostly only here for our Steadfast Samurai. Obviously, at some point too, you can give it to another follower as well if you need to, if you open up it. It's surprisingly really powerful into Kuwan. If you're playing against Kuwan, I would hard mulligan for Armor of the Stars, because once you set up some type of follower, either Steadfast Samurai or something bigger like Mach Knight or whatever, with Armor of the Stars, it becomes a lot harder for them to really interact with it, because almost all their removal is target based, and a lot of their followers cost a lot, and if they don't get high value off of like playing a Curse Crafter, when you have a quote-unquote wide board, if you only have like this one follower with Armor of the Stars, they might actually be forced to Curse Crafter Evo and crash it in and not really get any value off the Curse Crafter, because one, you can't target it, they can't sack the token to do damage to it, making it very awkward for people to deal with, or Kuwan players in particular, to deal with your board. I talked about this earlier. This is more of like the surprise storm damage out of hand, but the big thing is Kagemitsu, getting 7 evos off in a game is like, maybe it happens 1 in 10 games or something, or depending on the matchup. But some matchups, if you actually go long consistently, you'll be able to hit the 7 evos fairly consistently. But this package is just so powerful in the off chance that you do get to that point where this can restand, essentially. Not having the option to storm and win the game on the spot feels pretty bad in that case if you actually get there. So I think just combination of Kagemitsu and the fact that giving something storm out of nowhere is still very scary for a lot of opponents, and they don't necessarily calculate that damage all the time if you just randomly have an outrunning the encroaching heat in hand. But the fact that it works so well with Kagemitsu is just the main reason we have to play this as a one of if we're playing Kagemitsu. And because I feel like Kagemitsu works as a one drop, basically the one drop removal for the deck to interact with our opponent's board. And later in the game, the potential to win the game out of it. You just have to run that combination. If you're not running Kagemitsu, then obviously ditch this card, but I think Kagemitsu kind of, helps out with the removal when needed, because you don't have really great ways to interact with your opponent's board if they start going wider than you do. Floor Fencer. I mean, the card is Floor Fencer. We all know what it does. It summons a bunch of bodies on the board. It obviously helps Ramia. It puts like 7/7 worth of stats across the board, so they can't just use one spell to remove like one follower and answer our quote unquote 7/7. Making it a little bit tougher for decks to, they might have to spend more resources to remove the tokens and so forth. If you've been playing Sword for a while, you already know how busted it is. Gem Staff Commander, love it, hate it. If you're playing Leonidas, you probably have to play some kind of search. Gem Staff Commander just works well in the fact that, it can search anything in our deck, basically except Fina and the spell cards. And the fact that it's a 3 cost is nice, doesn't require an Evo. That's like the main draw factor to Gem Staff Commander for that consistency, and no Evo, no Evo spot taken from it. So, we're just forced to play it. It kind of sucks in a way because, hitting like Heroic Entry, hitting Gem Staff Commander is probably the worst roll you could probably get. Maybe Mars Knight is worse if you can't Evo with that turn. But yeah, it sucks. It's a necessary evil just for added consistency, added hand size. The fact that we can get it off Courtly Dance or even Heroic Entry is fine as well. The big thing is you're searching when this comes onto the board, you search Leonidas out and you show it to your opponent and go, listen, at any point you lose control of this game, Leonidas will come down and just end things for you. So they'll always be forced to play around Leonidas if possible, make it more awkward for them to really deal with you once you hit turns 6 and 7, which is nice. And then, like I said, added some consistency. We can search out 1-drops or whatever we need that's not a spell and not Fina in this list with Gem Staff Commander, which is important. Mog Knight, we all know how busted this card is. The fact that it gains Storm when it comes out onto the board from anywhere means that it also works with Courtly Dance as well. As long as it's not, as long as this card not coming from your hand, you're good to go. It's going to have Storm. The big one, obviously, is a turn 3 Heroic Entry with Evo Point, meaning that you can use one of your 2 Evos to not only answer something on the board, but also Storm in for 5 damage. Whenever that happens, usually you're going to win those games. That's a lot of damage for your opponent to eat. It's a quarter of their life on turn 3, which is backbreaking, because not only do you answer something on the board, you have this 5/5 hitting them in the face, and now they have to answer this 5/5 as well on the board. This is the reason you play Heroic Entry. This is the reason you play Mock Knight. It's just too good. Like, I don't know what else to say. Card is busted. It's almost like a digitally made card. Mars Silent Flame General is back now. This card surprisingly does a lot of work in this list. You can kind of curve out with this card if you happen to hit it off Heroic Entry or just have it in your hand. And then the turns with, for example, with Courtly Dance are nice because you could hit Mars, play it first, then play the Ralmia and play another 2-drop or 1-drop or whatever. And then those 2 extra followers you play on the board, as long as they're officers, they're going to get +1 attack on both of those, which is really great. And then obviously we do play 2 of the Evo. A lot of times you're going to be playing this on 6. You can't use Evo points for the on evolve side, and you don't use Evo points because it costs 0 to Evo. But a lot of times you're only playing this on turn 6, because on 6 you could play this, rip out a Mock Knight from your deck, and then it's a 4/3 running in with Storm. It's really, really powerful. Otherwise, you could do things and if you need, you can get Steadfast Samurai for 1, which is not the worst in the world. I believe Ramia as well. Oh no, yeah, Ramia as well. You can grab her, which she's an officer traded as well, so that you can pull her out of the deck on turn 5 even, which is nice. And this comes out as a 4/2. And it has Rush, which is one of the other ways you can interact with your opponent's board. Yeah, Mars happens to be really good at adding that extra bit of damage to push you over the edge while also helping you build a board so your Ramia can evo even cheaper, basically. The heroic stuff, Heroic Entry, we have to play it. We all love gambling. If you guys saw the meme video I posted up, let's go gambling. But yeah, that's basically you. It's for the high roll, and it's basically like an extra copy of all your 3-drops essentially, in a way, but not really. But it adds some consistency to finding like a specific 3-drop whenever you draw you play this and you're looking for like a Mog Knight or even a Mars, or like any of our big impactful 3-drops, or even, you know, Ramia is not the worst in the world if you're going to be able to evo at that turn as well. Leonidas, if games go long, things against like Wardhaven and stuff, we just need the Leo. We do a 1 of Leo Evo. At this point, you should be you should know the matchups well enough to know I can get my Leonidas out, it'll be fine, or I need to remove my own Leonidas as soon as I play it to answer 2 things immediately, so I can get the amulet it generates, the Leonidas Resolve. One of the big things too is there's not that much amulet hate going around, which means that, you know, when the amulet drops down, it's a good chance that this will stick around for quite a while. And, you know, getting +3/+3 on a Mach Knight with Storm sounds insane. All of your aggressive cards, you know, pushing damage that way sounds like a lot of fun to me. Ramia coming in with Leonidas Resolve on the board, it's just insane potential damage. Like once Leonidas Resolve on the board, you should be winning in the next turn or 2. You should like follow up with a Courtly Dance or something at that point, because a lot of times you'd be pushing a lot of damage that way. If, like I said, if games go long, usually longer than 7 turns, that's usually when Leonidas and Courtly Dance shine the most. And finally, what usually this deck is kind of centered around essentially is Courtly Dance. So what's so nice about this card is just 1 card transitions usually into about 3 cards on the board for 6 cost, for 6 play points. A lot of times you're hoping to get like 2 2-drops and 1 3-drop that's really, really impactful. So like a lot of times something like Mach Knight, Ramia, and you know, even 2 Ramias even, but that, or even like one of the 1-drops here, or another combination is usually like 2 3-drops plus a 1-drop, which happens quite often as well. So you're going to get a max value a lot of times with this card. You don't necessarily whiff often on this card, because you do check 5, which means, you know, the only real cards that are going to make you whiff is Fina and the spell cards here. So as long as you keep the count of spell cards and Fina, and I guess technically Leonidas as well, understand the ratio that's left in your deck, you kind of know whether you're going to have a high chance to whiff or not. But yeah, that's basically the list. It's kind of like a mid-rangey with some burst, in-game burst, but unfortunately I think the biggest struggle about this deck is that, once again, the big boss the big boss Kuon in this meta kind of stops decks that perform very well past turn 7. They just have so much trouble dealing with Kuon. Kuon is so consistent at getting turn 7, turn 8 lethals, and like setting up board states that are just very scary at that point in the game, that decks like this that play somewhat of a fairish game plan just usually struggle into those, because they need the extra like 1 to 2 turns after turn 7 to be able to set up lethal or win that way. But yeah, if you are looking to get into Sword, and Courtly Dance is like the way to go, it's a lot of fun. You get like every game is kind of like a lot of you know, gambling in the sense of off of heroic entry, as well as Courtly Dance. Just like you never really have the same game twice essentially, because you're always like top checking cards and like hoping to pick certain things. The board states are never always like specifically the same. But yeah, the deck is very consistent. It does what it wants to do, and it does the same game plan into almost every matchup. So you don't really have to worry about learning a lot about how to play into matchups, more about just what to kind of what kind of removal they have that you might have to think about. But a lot of times that doesn't really matter too, because you're such a board-based deck. You just want to start throwing as much as you can onto the board and pushing damage that way, making your opponent answer your board instead of you answering their board, as always, because you're a sword player. But yeah, with that being said, that kind of wraps up this deck profile. Please let me know what you guys have been doing with Sword. I want to find a Sword list I truly enjoy, that I can like grind out a bunch and have a lot of fun with. So far, this has been the only list that kind of like spoke to me in that sense. I kind of like the little packages it has. I like the whole heroic entry, Courtly Dance stuff. It's a lot of fun. Now, is it a tier 1 deck? Obviously not. But I could see this, you know, if you bring this to the showdown, like a version like this, or this specific version, you'll probably make it top 32, because unironically, like Hunters, Sword is very consistent at what it wants to do every game. So you'll basically be able to do what you want to do. Just the unfortunate part, like Hunters, is that once you get past turn 7, every extra turn is like a blessing to you because you're not always guaranteed a turn 8 or a turn 9 in decks like this. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you guys are doing with the hero, or not heroes, but sword in general. With that being said, I hope to see you guys in the next video. Later, everyone.